BRICS is just an informal grouping of some countries completely dominated by the so-called G7. 2001 में एक Goldman Sachs is a very large investment firm. China and India have huge differences. Global South is now definitely gradually also a military powerhouse.
When the nation calls, knowledge answers. Welcome to Chai with Current, your one-stop destination for civil services strategy, current affairs, and mentorship that matters. Today, we bring you insights from someone whose pen has shaped public opinion for decades, whose mentorship has mentored hundreds of UPSC aspirants. It's wonderful to introduce Mr. Sutanu Guru, a veteran journalist, author, and a teacher with over 40 years of experience in institutions like the Times of India, the Economic Time, and the India Today Group. Currently serving as the Executive Director at Sea Water Foundation. So let's dive into this exclusive session where we decode the changing dynamics of India.
Thank you so much, Rupali. Wonderful to have you. Young friends, as the name itself suggests, Chai with current affairs. The tagline below is cracking the GS challenge. So it's very clear what we intend to do. What we will not be is an organized coaching center. We understand because of fierce competition, you have to pay fees and go to organized coaching centers. We will not be a coaching center. What we will be is a force multiplier which will help you prepare better for the general studies papers in all civil services examinations across India. And to help you with that, in these videos, we will provide unique historical context and perspective into each news and current affairs development issue and controversy. Now, what do I mean by historical context? मुझे लगता है कि आप लोग जो सिविल सर्विसेज की तैयारियां कर रहे हैं अभी, लगभग सब लोग 21वीं सदी में पैदा हुए हैं, born in the 21st century. तो आप अपने पेरेंट्स के पास जाइए, एल्डर्स के पास जाइए एंड आस्क, when I was born, were you using smartphones? When I was born, did you enjoy access to high speed internet? When I was born, were you making digital payments and transactions? When I was born, were you watching music shows and other videos on YouTube? And when I was born, were you spending hours every day on various social media platforms? The answer is no. So just imagine, young friends, in less than 25 years, how dramatically India and the world has transformed. And all these historical changes have a bearing and impact even on current affairs of the present day. So that is what we mean by force multiplier. And young friends, do remember, being better informed is always a recipe for higher chances of success, not just in your career, but also in your life.
Welcome to this episode of Chai with Current. Today we are going to discuss about BRICS. So recently we have seen a lot of questions coming up from the topic BRICS. Sir, what is BRICS and what is its purpose?
Actually, again, we need to have a historical context to this. Countries, often form groups which could be of mutual benefit to those particular set of countries. So, to resolve issues, to resolve differences, to have better trade relations, to benefit each other economically, etc., etc. Now, there are two kinds of, these kind of groupings. One of the most powerful grouping is NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Alliance. So, एक ज़माने में there was a Cold War where there was an alliance led by the Soviet Union, communism, and there was NATO. NATO was led by the United States and most of Western Europe, Canada, and other countries. So, NATO was not just a bloc or group of nations which was an informal gathering. NATO was also a military alliance, right? So NATO partners are committed to each other's military protection also. But if you Compare that with BRICS. BRICS is no such alliance. BRICS is just an informal grouping of some countries who think that they can have dialogues on a routine basis and a regular basis and help each other out in this emerging multipolar world. And उसका सबसे बड़ा रीजन ये है कि 2001 2001 में एक गोल्डमैन सैक्स इज अ वेरी वेरी लार्ज इन्वेस्टमेंट फर्म. They actually coined this term BRICS. Their contention was that traditionally, in geopolitics and geoeconomics, we say there is a global north and global south. Global north is usually your G7 countries, most of Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, and global south is mostly emerging countries which were not as developed as these G7 nations, but which were emerging in the 21st century as economically dynamic nations. So BRICS का बहुत simple था. It was a short form for Goldman Sachs identified Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa as the emerging nations which could become very powerful in the 21st century. So they coined the term BRICS, and initially the first few meetings were held maybe in 2009 or so, and since then there have been regular annual dialogue meetings. But unlike NATO or unlike some other alliances, it is an informal grouping, and it is not something which is cast in iron, right? It's just a discussion and dialogue forum.
Well, sir, isn't there any deep differences between the BRICS nation?
Absolutely, Rupali. There are differences because, but let me first, add something to the concept of BRICS. So, BRICS, as the years passed by, the BRICS nations realized that they need a grouping to counter the dominance of the West. So, abhi recently, originally BRICS was 5 countries, but just recently you had Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia. They have also joined BRICS. Now, BRICS is a 10-member grouping, and it could possibly expand, right? When you have countries like as diverse as Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, they all have their own compulsions, own political structures, own economic systems, and they also have differences. Like, for instance, China and India have huge differences. We have a border conflict with China going on since the late 1950s. Abhi recently, 5 years ago in Galwan, many soldiers from both Indian side and Chinese side died because of a border conflict. So India and China have huge differences. Similarly, Russia and China also had huge differences. And there are many issues on which Brazil may not agree with India, where India may not agree with South Africa, where India's point of view may differ from Russia's. And yet, it is important for these groups of nations to come together, because it is always better to have a dialogue and a continuing conversation and see where points of view and mutual interest can converge. That is the key element. And over the years, the BRICS grouping has acquired a formidable character of its own. It's not an alliance, but it's a very formidable global south group.
Well, sir, can this bloc be an alternative to G7 nations?
Well, it's like this, Rupali. Since the end of Second World War, 1945, in terms of both geopolitics and geoeconomics, the world has been completely dominated by the so-called G7 and some other countries also, where I mentioned Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US. The leader has been the US. For some decades, the Soviet Union offered an alternative and a challenge. But as we know, communism doesn't work. The Soviet Union collapsed, and the US led G7 and the NATO became the sole superpowers of the world. and they dictated terms on every issue. They were like, what we say in Hindi, bhai, jiski lathi uski bhais, dadagiri. So gradually, these other countries like China, India, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, they all realized that it is no longer possible to accept all the diktats of the West. फॉर इंस्टेंस अभी ही हमारे जो अभी हम लोग ये एपिसोड बना रहे हैं, इसी दौरान चल रहा है, डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ने 50% टैरिफ लगा दिया है इंडिया पे, राइट? एंड क्वाइट सरप्राइजिंगली, despite deep differences between them, China has openly come out in support of India and criticized the US. So what is happening is that this global south, which is represented by the BRICS countries, global south is now definitely emerging as an economic and gradually also a military powerhouse. मैं आपको एग्जाम्पल दे रहा हूँ, ये जो 10 नेशंस हैं अभी, जो ब्रिक्स के नेशंस हैं, उनका जीडीपी आप अगर टोटल कंबाइन कर दोगे, it is significantly higher than that of the G7 nations. So already in terms of economic size, the global south is becoming bigger and bigger compared to the traditionally dominant West. And in any case, the BRICS nations also constitute more than 40% of the population of the world. Indonesia, India, China, Ethiopia, these are all countries with very, very big populations, right? So in terms of population, in terms of sheer size of GDP, in terms of economic growth, in terms of economic dynamism, in terms of market, like China is the largest consumer market in the world, and then India is the third largest consumer market in the world. So these are all, global south countries which are now challenging the, what we call in jargon, the hegemony of the global north, and BRICS is playing possibly a significant role in that.
Well, so as a BRICS nation, clearing out the dominance of G7, they are focusing on multipolar world as their concept. So then, what is the future?
Well, see, no empire, vanishes overnight. The Chandragupta, Maurya, then Ashoka, then, maybe it took 150 years. The Greek civilization, the Roman Empire, the Mughal Empire, empires inevitably come to an end, but it takes time. So the British Empire, by the end of 19th century, nobody could have imagined that the British Empire will end. But within 50 years, the British Empire was khatam. And post Second World War, it is the United States which is the empire. United States is both militarily and economically an empire and a superpower. शायद आपको ये अंदाजा नहीं होगा that there are American troops and soldiers, thousands of them, in Japan, in South Korea, in Qatar, in Iraq, in Germany, in UK, in Spain, wherever you can imagine. And of course, economically, they are the number one country in the world, the largest GDP, $28 trillion almost. But that empire is now in relative decline because China is already $18 trillion. India is going to be touching $5 trillion soon. And most of these other BRICS nations, because of their economic dynamism, will keep growing at a very, very fast rate. So what is happening is most empires don't like when they see their relative decline. So all these things that you see, the pressure tactics, the trade wars, the sanctions, the other things, these are steps taken. They have been taken throughout history by empires. But a stage will definitely come when there will be no empire of China or no empire of Russia or India, but it will be a truly multipolar world. And Americans may not like it, but their single solitary dominance on global affairs will definitely come to an end.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for your valuable inputs. And stay tuned with this episode of Chai with Current. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you, Rupali. I repeat, being better informed increases the chances of success not only in your career but also in life.